Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Get down! Baltimore!
What are they getting?
Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.
All right, welcome on back to another edition of the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. It is Thursday night, September 8th, 2022. My name is Jake Luke. I'm joined on my screen by Spencer Nathaniel Schultz. It is 8:26 p.m. and football is officially back.
It most certainly is, my friend. We have a fun, tight episode. We have on Connor Rogers of Bleacher Report and the PFF Football Stock Exchange podcast as well. A recurring guest. I think we chop it up. Might be our first guest, something along those lines. We've had him on quite a few times now. Very similar to us, I would say, personality-wise. He's got a little bit more of that New York mojo. His hair's a little bit more slick back than mine. But Connor's a great guy. Gave us a great interview and getting into the nuts and bolts, as we referred to it, of the Jets and what they've done this year and their expectations.
Yeah, strikingly handsome guy. The chain was looking great for anyone watching on video on YouTube. It's just a person that makes me, feel jealous that I wish that, I had half the swag that he did. But either way, it's nice to get some of that afterglow when he hops on here with us. And we mentioned it a couple times, but yeah, probably looking back on it, probably the first, at the very least, like the first big name guest that we got on here. And he did it like a couple weeks into the program, even like existing, at least in this iteration. So it's always really nice to chat with him. And we saw the Jets coming up on the docket there, and we're like, hey, perfect time to get back in touch with Connor. Haven't had him on in a while. He's a good draft-centric guest to get on, so we do get him in that time of year. But hey, Jets, Ravens, we figured perfect time to get him to hop in here and talk about this game. We talked about it with him as well, and I guess we're just kind of hopping in here, like you said, keep it tight, get our predickies in. So I guess, just overall, how you feeling about Sunday's matchup? You're going to be in attendance, which is going to be something. What's the feeling?
I'm going to be in the big fridge watching the old game in that giant gray weird stadium that they have. It'll be my first time actually going in there. So very excited about that. But in terms of this game and running through the Jets roster, aside from the troubles they've had on their offensive line, they're pretty stacked, man. They have a very stacked defense. We also forget this is not just the Joe Flacco reunion game, but also the CJ Mosley reunion game. The Jets have been the Ravens North for quite some time. Joe Douglas, former Raven as well. They've had a plethora of young players roll through there, practice squad guys, things of that nature. So they do know the Ravens in theory very well. Not that they have anyone terribly recent to that effect, but ton of young talent, young playmakers, Carl Lawson coming back. I think this game's going to be a little tiny bit tough in some ways. I mean, if Sauce Gardner's a player, if Jermaine Johnson's a player, if Carl Lawson's looking good, they can seriously bring the noise on a Ravens offensive line that hasn't had that continuity in place yet. We still don't know who the left guard is. The left tackle is going to be someone who hasn't played in a regular season game in quite some time. So I do think the Jets are very capable of giving the Ravens some problems. I don't foresee the Ravens putting up, a 35-point performance or a 30-point performance unless the Jets offense is so inept because of Joe Flacco and because of their offensive line that they just completely crumble. So I think the Jets give the Ravens a little bit of a ride. I think we see this game get weird in the third quarter. I could see it being very sloppy. Lamar Jackson does tend to come out and be quite, in a positive way, stoic in week ones and focused in terms of his passing ability. His mechanics are fresh from whatever he worked on. We've seen that the last 3 seasons. So I'm very excited for that aspect of it. I think the Ravens ultimately are able to pull away in this one. I don't think the Jets are going to be able to run the ball. I think the Ravens will figure out a way to. We'll be able to figure out a way to exploit their linebackers and get the ball to Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and guys like Rashad Bateman. So I think the Ravens win this one somewhere, let's call it 26, Jets, let's call it 16, something like that.
Yeah, we get into it in the interview, but I am concerned about those tackles versus Owe. Concerned for the Jets, that is. I think the Ravens and that pass rush, they're going to be able to dial things up. I think Mike McDonald's going to sneaky want to make a statement. You've been kind of harping on the fact that it's very weird that he is just sort of the youngest defensive coordinator in the league and like nobody's talking about it. I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. He's going to want to make a statement in this one. I think he's going to try and disguise some coverages, maybe try to bait Joe into some of those lollipop interceptions that we know he's liable to throw here and there. And when he gets pressured and he gets rattled and he is off his rhythm, then things can get away quickly. And I am expecting that kind of stoic Lamar Jackson. I'm thinking back to that 2020 week 1 against the Browns, week 1 game against the Browns, where he just came out there and just kind of lit them up in a very sort of dominant performance, and one that didn't really involve his legs all that much. I'm maybe expecting something a little bit similar here. Like you said, I think the Jets can give them a little bit of a game. They have a relatively deep roster. They have some star power, in fact, to even work with. So I think the Jets get off to a little bit of an early lead. Ravens Twitter starts kind of freaking out. Sky is falling. And then Lamar kind of takes over. And then it winds up being about 33-23 is my guess.
I love it. I think a major thing for this game as well is the Jets do have dynamic ball carriers, and that doesn't just mean running backs. Elijah Moore, very good after the catch. Corey Davis has broken the Ravens before. Garrett Wilson, quite dynamic after the catch in college. Breece Hall, Michael Carter, all those guys can do damage. The Ravens stunk on ice tackling last year. They didn't stink on ice tackling against the Raiders in week 1. I think we saw some fine throws from Lamar in week 1 last year as well. But anyway, the tackling has to be on point. They need to be fundamentally sound defensively. I think Mike McDonald is ready to have them in that position very much so. And I think that when you have guys like Patrick Queen, Odafe Owe, Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Chuck Clark, Marcus Williams, Pepe Williams, all these guys that can run and hit and tackle, Justin Matabike, play in space a little bit, the Ravens should be okay. So I think if they're disciplined, they're able to kind of silence the Jets offense. I think that, like you said, if you hit Flacco, if Odafe Owe hits him full speed, he's going to change. He's going to start throwing balls in the dirt. He's going to want to get the ball thrown away quickly and thrown out of bounds and not want to continue playing in that sense. So I think that the Jets, like you said, can maybe do a little fun and razzle dazzle and throw some deep fun play action, throwbacks, things like that to maybe go score a long touchdown or maybe have a really nice opening drive. But I just don't foresee Flacco being able to sustain 4 quarters against a really hungry defense and a coordinator in Mike McDonald that's ready to go prove himself and prove that they do have a pass rush while that offensive line is ailing. So we're both going Ravens in this one.
Yeah, we certainly are. And the game has already started up, and we potted over an hour last night. We had the Queen interview come out earlier this week. So I think I might be all taked out, buddy, before we get to this interview. You got anything else you want to throw out there?
Let's see Rashad Bateman start the Prince Who Was Promised campaign. Let's see him go beat up on Reed and maybe gets matched up on Sauce a little bit and goes and does some fun things. I think that's what we're all ready to see.
Devin Duvernay, 2 touchdowns. That's my bold prediction. All purpose. So do with that what you will. So I guess that is going to be it. And I guess before we throw it over to the interview, feel free to follow us on social media. If you're not already, you can find the show account at Podcast Beatdown on Twitter. I am at Jake Luke. That's LOUQUE. Spencer is at Ravens 4 Dummies. That is the number 4. Follow us on IG too. We're getting the thing fired back up and ready to go for the season. We're definitely most active on there.
Throw some 5-star reviews. Give all the good stuff. Share this podcast with a friend. Hit your boys up. Show us the love. We need it. We're trying to get fired back up, baby.
We are. The boys are absolutely buzzing. They're fired up, and we're ready to go for the season. But tell your friends, tell anyone that might need some content in their lives from two strapping young lads like ourselves. We have had some good reviews rolling, and actually we're going to need to read those on the air at some point. But just keep those rolling. 5-star reviews. Follow us on all the social media platforms. Get after us in the YouTube comments. We're all over the place. So thank you guys as always for listening. We will talk to you on Sunday night with a recap show. And to close us out this week, here is our good buddy, Connor Rogers.
See ya.
Arrivederci. All right. We now welcome on a very special guest. It's a good friend of the pod. I was thinking back on this, Connor. I think you might be the first guest in the history of the show, now that I think back on it.
That's pretty crazy. I was thinking when I heard from you guys, I was like, this is one of those shows that is not a draft show. It's not a Jets or Mets show that I do every single year. And I couldn't remember when I started, but it has been a while now.
Yeah, it was spring of 2019, I want to say. And I was just like, I had started this thing up, this kind of new thing. I'd been blogging for a couple of years, but I started the podcast and I was like, you know what, why not just shoot my shot with some of these people? And you were, even at that time, you were already pretty big with Bleacher Report. So I reached out on a whim, and nice enough guy to say yes then. And you're still crazy enough to, keep popping back in here with us every year or so. So yeah, it's Connor Rogers of Bleacher Report and the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. How's it going, my man?
Good, guys. It's always fun to chop it up. Obviously, our worlds collide this week as the Ravens travel to play the New York Jets for the week opener. So we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, we certainly are. So I guess kicking you right off with that, I mean, we're getting ready for that sort of special occasion with our two teams playing. And I guess my question here is, and it might be a complicated one as a Jets fan for a lot of different reasons, but where are the emotions at? What are you feeling heading into this game right now? You don't even have to like analyze things, or it doesn't have to be nuts and bolts. What is the feeling right now around this Jets team?
I think a little on edge for the fact of the Jets, who in recent history have just totally no-showed September, can't afford that anymore. And it's, it's one thing, like I'm on a pretty rational side where I don't expect the Jets to make the playoffs this year, but I also don't expect the Jets to pick in the top 5. And if they do, that's a big indictment on everybody in the organization. It's not just Joe Douglas. It's not just Robert Saleh. It's not just ownership or just Zach Wilson. That would be a big indictment on the entire organization. And listen, the Jets are home underdogs by a touchdown. That is pretty telling from Vegas against a team that, yes, they didn't make the playoffs last year mostly because of injuries, but still, it's not like they have a team coming in that's just off the Super Bowl. So that tells you a lot of, one, Vegas and a lot of people like myself really like the Ravens, but they also don't like the Jets. And if the Jets do start the way that the books are projecting, that a lot of analysts are projecting, that they just no-show September for yet another year, and if it starts week 1, it's gonna be chaotic, and there's gonna be a lot of pressure, whether it's Joe Flacco playing or not, which it is. That's not a big enough excuse to go, you know what, we're kicking the can down the road to 2023 yet again.
Definitely. And just looking through this roster on paper, it looks like, obviously the Mekhi Becton pick, which I love so much and such a talented player, has had his troubles. But then they go get Dwayne Brown for insurance. Then you feel good about that. He's looking shady this weekend. Elijah Vera Tucker, a very good guard. You go get Laken Tomlinson, a very, squatty, capable, strong, someone who can drive off the ball, do some damage. Connor McGovern, not a terrible center at all. All of those pieces, the amount of playmakers they have, the way they've revamped the secondary. And then I just like the way that you put it, that it's not, Joe D's fault. It's not going to be Salah's fault. It's not going to be the Johnsons, the ownership, but it just feels like this ominous cloud found its way into an area that it shouldn't have and didn't belong in. And Robert Saleh, I feel like, is the one that's going to have to eat a lot of that cloud and run headfirst into the storm. So how do they survive this tough opening, I guess, is my question.
Well, it's a good question. I think that, one, they can't lean on any excuses. I know Flacco is at the point where he hasn't been good for a while, but can he be serviceable? And were times where he's had to play, and he has been serviceable because the offense, quite frankly, is just in a much better place construction-wise. LaFleur has shown he has a clue. They have better talent. Are they an upper-tier talent offense? No, but you said it. They've invested a lot of picks and a lot of money. It's one of the most expensive offensive lines in football. They drafted a wide receiver in the top 40 in 2021. They drafted one in the top 10 this year. They paid Corey Davis. They brought back Braxton Berrios. They paid 2 tight ends. They drafted a tight end. They've drafted 2 running backs relatively early over the last 2 years. That is a lot of investment in the offense. And that offense has to show up against a Ravens team, and obviously I'd love your guys' input as well, that undoubtedly has a lot of talent, but they're also potentially missing some of that talent to kick things off. They're dealing with multiple guys coming back from rehabs. It would surprise me if Ronnie Stanley is thrown into the fire in this game. I don't even think that should be a consideration. I think everybody knows that. That's a big loss. Marcus Peters, I think he's a guy that games up to play, and he loves to play, so that wouldn't shock me. But once again, a guy working back the middle of the field, like there's holes here that the Jets should be not scoring 30, 40 points, but capable. Can you get the run game going? You brought up Vera Tucker and Laken Tomlinson in a wide zone scheme. Those guys got to get going. You got to start running the ball at Breece Hall and Michael Carter to take some of the weight off of Joe Flacco. You got to utilize the tight ends in the middle of the field. Can you hit an explosive play to Elijah Moore? Can you do it? Like, these are the things that the Jets, once again, the Jets don't need to go out and pull off a huge upset or, come down to the wire, a final field goal from either side. But you need to hang around. You need to be competitive. You can't be 17-0, 21-0 going
playing into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, playing into the fourth quarter would be a good start, right? That would be a really good start. And that's something that capable teams do. And unfortunately, the Jets haven't been in that mold in quite some time. And it has to start right now.
Yeah, and you hit on, I think, a lot of the grocery shopping that's been done there the last couple of years. We're familiar here with Joe Douglas's work plenty and following him in Philly and stuff like that. It feels like they have acquired a lot of talent. I'm curious about your take on this past offseason, where you're a guy who kind of cranks the content up in the offseason with the draft pod that you're doing and all this other kind of stuff. So I'm curious, what was your sort of personal checklist as 2022 was rolling around for them, and how close do you think they got to hitting it?
In a vacuum, I really like the players, right? You just go by the board. Garrett Wilson was my number one wide receiver in the draft. Brees Hall was my number one running back. Sauce Gardner was my number one corner. Ruckert was my tight end too. Like they got a lot of talent in this draft. So in a vacuum, I really like the players they took. And I felt that way in 2021. And they got some early returns from that class as rookies last year across the board, days 1, 2, and 3. They need to replicate that this year. Jermaine Johnson, who I didn't even bring up, they got at the end of the first round. This is a team that's needed pass rush for a long time. Now, the problem there is, guys, we had concern about Mekhi Becton missing the entire season. He's a guy that was banged up in college, banged up as a rookie, missed his second year, and they kind of bet the house on him. They let Morgan Moses walk and sign with the Ravens, ironically, a player that is just an ultimate Iron Man, right? So you have that situation where losing a tackle is a big deal, as you guys are well aware of that situation, especially when you have a very young quarterback back there. And when they lost tackles at times last year, it really hurt Zach Wilson and it hurt the entire offense. Becton gets hurt. You can't sit there and look at it and go, well, it's bad luck. We didn't see this coming. It happens, unfortunately, every year. I'm sorry. It's just a reality with him at this point where you love the player, you root for the player. He's immensely talented, like you said, but it's a pattern at this point. You're lucky enough Dwayne Brown was out there, but Dwayne Brown's 37, and now he's dealing with a bad shoulder. So these are the things that when you look at it, you go, hey, I really like the way the roster is moving in the right direction. But let's be fair here. There has been some poor oversights at times. And I'm really curious if we see the ramifications of those right away in week 1.
Very well said, and in such a thorough, in-depth, but concise way that will help us get to Thursday kickoff before this interview concludes, hopefully, at the same time. So I'm just very curious about Robert Saleh. A lot of people anticipated him to maybe do some different things in terms of maybe not playing that kind of Pete Carroll cover 3 look. But when you're just looking on paper, man, I mean, Carl Lawson comes back, sure, the Achilles injury, but the amount of time he's had should be explosive. Quinnen Williams, explosive pass rusher. John Franklin Myers, one of the most underrated players in the NFL. You mentioned Jermaine Johnson, guys like Sheldon Rankins. Solomon Thomas was coming off of a great year in a similar Gus Bradley system. What is the realm of possibility of this pass rush not living up to snuff? And where do you look at it and feel like there's any sort of impasse? Because to me, this is a top 10 pass rush through and through and has one of the best pass rushing minds in the NFL in Saleh that should finally get the job done.
It has to be. It just has to be. There's no way around it. It's a great question. When you look at it, it goes back to my point about the offensive line investments. They have invested so much into this defensive line. And if there's some good I can take away from the short time Saleh's been here, the Jets for a long time, and I'm saying going back to when Rex Ryan was here was the last time I remember they had an identity, right? Rex was an excellent defensive mind, man coverage, similar to really what Baltimore has run for a long time, ironically. And they were a ground and pound team on offense, and they played really good special teams. That's what the Jets were. And they took the game out of the quarterback's hands and made it to back-to-back AFC championships. They've not had an identity since. With Saleh here, you're starting to feel that they are finding an identity again. We know what the San Francisco offense looks like. They're trying to replicate that. It's not going to be exactly that, but you understand the rushing attack. Defensively, like you said, the Seattle cover 3, the Jets are interesting to me because they've started to show that they could be a little bit more varied than that. Last year, they were traditionally a cover 3 or quarters team on early downs. When they got into third downs, passing downs, they actually went to man coverage and they brought a lot of pressure. So they completely changed the script. Problem was they had all day 3 picks or UDFAs out there at corner in man coverage. That could not last. They couldn't get off the field. What do? They draft Sauce Gardner with a top 5 pick. They pay DJ Reed $11 million a year, right? They really like Michael Carter, their slot. They
Jordan Whitehead brought in as well, a very underrated.
Exactly. So you revamp the secondary. I think they're going to start to skew a lot to being a little bit more aggressive, be that man coverage team. They're going to be a cover 3 quarters team predominantly, but they're not going to be afraid to put more on the corner's plate, bring more pressure, tell those pass rushers to pin their ears back and go. they have had a really good summer. Carl Lawson has looked like himself. Quinnen Williams, I think, is going to have a breakout year. You brought up John Franklin Myers. They paid Jacob Martin a good free agency deal as well. He's going to come in that NASCAR package on third downs to hopefully get them off the field. So the Jets, that's where their defense is built, up front, letting those pass rushers attack.
On the offensive side of the ball, we're very familiar with Joe Flacco. Our listenership is very familiar with Joe Flacco. We love the guy. He might be a little over the hill at this point. So what can LaFleur do, especially with this tackle situation that we mentioned that is looking really ugly with Odafe Oweh coming off the edge there? What can LaFleur do to make the game easier for him, get him into a rhythm, because he's a guy that can get flustered very easily. When he's on his rhythm, he is one of the more talented quarterbacks I've seen probably, and that's no exaggeration, but he can get off of it very quickly. And what is kind of the keys to keeping him on rhythm and just kind of Luke Skywalker stay on target?
Yeah, you're right. His best days are behind him. But, and to your point about rhythm, it felt like during the summer, he got to a point where he was having an incredible camp where practices were just flawless. And then that game against the Giants in the preseason, he threw the awful interception and felt like the whole ship just sunk. So you're right. It just goes like that, where he can get into molds of hitting all of his throws, but he can't move. He can't move, guys. And the Jets drafted a quarterback number 2 overall in large part because of the type of athlete he is. So that cuts your offense in half. All those things you were excited to do with Zach Wilson, despite Zach Wilson having, the IQ is not there. The decision-making has its own problems. The type of athlete he is can get him out of those situations at times. That's not the case with Flacco. He's not going anywhere. So listen, unfortunately with the injury, if Dwayne Brown doesn't play, they're going to have to be a very 12 personnel heavy team. You're going to see CJ Uzama and Tyler Conklin living on the field. You're going to see Uzama giving tackle help a lot. I would imagine they kick Fant to the left side where he's been very, very good. He's not been good on the right side, and that's where they plan to play him. He's been good on the left side. If you're starting a rookie Max Mitchell on the right side, the Ravens are just going to bring pressure from that side. And it's too tough of an assignment for Max Mitchell. The tight end has to live there and stay there and help him. And I don't know if that will be enough as well, but you'll see a ton of motion from this team. You'll see a lot of misdirection. You'll see a lot of creative plays, whether it's those pitch passes with Braxton Berrios and Elijah Moore because of their outside speed. You'll see Breece Hall and Michael Carter get a ton of outlet passes. Flacco is the kind of guy that the good thing with him is he will live to die another day. He will take the check down over and over again at this point of his career to live for the next play. That's been Zach Wilson's biggest problem. So I think you're going to try to see LaFleur get those backs or tight ends on linebackers. And that's what they did to the Bengals last year. That's how Mike White upset the Bengals in just an absurd football game. I think they're going to try to get to some of that for easy throws for Flacco that don't require deep drops.
Staying on the offensive side of the ball, don't want to keep you a terrible amount longer, but you talk about, obviously, they have the ties to the wide zone, Shanahan lineage, all that stuff. Now you're talking about some offensive linemen missing from a scheme that requires a lot of continuity. At the same time, you're talking about a rookie back in Breece Hall. I love what I've seen out of Michael Carter last year and dating back to UNC. Simple question. Are the Jets going to be able to run the football against the Ravens?
Down 2 tackles now, I'm a little more hesitant. If you told me, and once again, you can't use the Becton excuse for everything because he just hasn't played. So, but if they're down Dwayne Brown, it's going to be an uphill battle because you're starting a guy out there in Max Mitchell, I'm assuming, or Connor McDermott if you start him. Whoever won, they're not starting level players right now, guys. I don't think McDermott ever will be. I think Max Mitchell can maybe get to a point of serviceable mediocrity, but it's not right now. So I'm going to lean no. I think that the Dwayne Brown injury could be a massive, massive spot for them. He looked great over summer in the brief time we saw him run blocking, and they were going to really get him on the move, get Lakin on the move, ABT on the move. And you're not selling. There's no athleticism threat from Flacco that scares you. If you had, forget it. If you had Wilson there and Dwayne Brown playing, it's like, okay, that's a lot of things to worry about. Then maybe the ground game does get going a little bit, but this is an uphill battle for the Jets. And it's just hard to feel confident with the positions they are down at right now.
So we've gotten into a lot of the nuts and bolts of it, and you can kind of continue to break it down from this perspective if you want to, but let me give you a little hypothetical here. Would you rather they win this game with Joe Flacco, or in a world where Zach Wilson could play, he would have at least like a decent game and they'd lose? What would you take as a fan right now?
It's a good question. I think I would take the Flacco win because this 53-man roster has to take a step forward. And I understand as much as anybody, Zach Wilson needs to develop into a long-term starting quarterback. But the Jets' problems for as bad as they've been at quarterback for a long time, their problems have gone through the entire 53-man roster. And I told you about the September issues, but it's a season-long issue. You need to see growth. They're a young team still. They're a very young team. They were even younger last year when they played a lot of those day 3 picks no matter what. You got to show these guys under Saleh that you can win. And when their game raises, when Zach Wilson comes back, that will only help him. So I am truly, for the first time in a long time, at winning over everything. The days of just constantly tanking for that pick between 2 and 5. You can't function as a franchise when you're always in that mold.
Well said. And they've already had the multiple first-round picks coming in. You know, they have a depth of talent. It is time to win.
Spent the money. They made the trades. They used the picks. You have to start playing competitive
They did
football.
the things.
Yes, it's done.
Checked everything off. So I guess to get you out of here, I just wanted to ask for me at least, the Jets win if, the Jets lose if.
Ooh, the Jets win if they can contain Lamar Jackson and not overrush. That was the Jets' biggest problem last year, is when the pass rush was winning, they would overrush a lot and let quarterbacks or running backs break free. The Jets cannot do that in this game, and Lamar is the most threatening quarterback in the league when it comes to that. So if they can contain Lamar and the rush gets going, I actually do believe in their defense in this game. But that's the biggest variable, is containing Lamar Jackson. So I'm not reinventing the wheel here, guys. So I think that's the big one for me. The Jets lose if the offense does not function under Flacco. They don't stand a chance. You have to score points in this league. You have to give the ball to your playmakers. You have to hit some kind of explosive play. I don't care if that's a Breece Hall outlet where he makes a guy miss and goes for 30 to 40 yards. I don't care if that's a downfield throw to Elijah Moore. Whatever it may be, a deep seam pass to Tyler Conklin, which will definitely be a staple of this team. You have to hit some explosive plays. It's been a struggle for a long time. If they can't do that, forget the turnovers. If they can't move the football, they won't stand a chance.
I actually got a couple things, but I'll keep it rapid fire to get you.
Go ahead.
One word to describe the Ravens draft from this past spring.
Oh, it's my favorite draft. Favorite is the word I would use.
Love that. The Jets starting quarterback in 2024 is going to be.
Ooh, I'm still a believer in Zach Wilson. I'll say Zach Wilson. I really am.
What is going to happen with the New York Mets?
I think we are going to see somehow the Mets and Braves or the Mets and Dodgers in the NLCS. If Scherzer and DeGrom are healthy, I'm taking the Mets in the World Series. I know.
Did Timmy Trumpet ruin everything like Jerry Seinfeld?
That's the rumors right now. Thank God they swept a doubleheader yesterday, because I couldn't take one more thing. I saw Jerry Seinfeld complaining about it. I'm like, guys, for the first time in how long, we are having fun. Do not ruin it.
Yeah, we're pretty sympathetic to the Mets here. We're big Buck guys, obviously, and
Of course.
yeah,
My favorite AL team.
Yeah, and there we go. And we sort of know the feeling, being the basement dwellers that sort of came out of nowhere to be in the playoff contention. People are already kind of getting toxic with it. We're like, guys, we are way ahead of schedule here. So we
oh
can
my God. I mean,
in our own way.
They are so young. They are so fun to watch. I was saying to somebody earlier today that they have a little bit of the Braves mojo right now, where whoever they call up, despite the public being like, oh, he's not ready, he's too young, just flourishes instantly. And that's one of I don't love it when the Braves do it, because I hate the Braves, but I love it when other teams that are not in the Mets' way do it, because young talent in baseball, there is nothing more exciting.
Absolutely. Well, that is all I have for you officially. I guess before we get you going here, what is your official prediction for what's going to happen on Sunday? Let's close that out with that.
Yeah, I'll say 24-14 Baltimore. I'd look at this game. I think that it'll be interesting in the first half. I think ultimately I do worry about the Jets containing Lamar Jackson. I do worry about the Flacco head scratcher at some point that kind of, like you said, derails him, where things were going well, not great, well, and then they all go in the tank. So I don't think it'll be a bad game by any stretch of the means. I think the Jets do show some life at home. They are a young team. I just don't think they're in Baltimore's class right now.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate the time as always, my man. How about you go ahead and plug your stuff here that you're doing and your social media, everything to our audience that might not be familiar before we get you going?
Sure. At Connor J. Rogers on Twitter, everything on Bleacher Report, and the PFF NFL Stock Exchange podcast I do with Trevor Sikkema. We have a really good time 3 days a week. If you like the draft, college, NFL coverage, whatever floats your boat, we probably cover it. So it's always great talking to you guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate you, brother.
We really appreciate it. And yeah, 3 years of this thing running, let's make it another 3. It's always an interesting sort of pull back to that time when we first started this thing up. It's always nostalgic, and we really, really appreciate your time, and you deserve every good thing that's coming to you in this business.
Thank you, guys. I'm sure I'll talk to you closer to the draft as well.
Sounds
got
good,
it.
my friend.
Later.
Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Get down! Baltimore!
What are they getting? Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.